Today I asked the question, should you retire in the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, or Cambodia? Cost of living should not decide this question. The cost of living in the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, or Cambodia is much cheaper than Europe, Canada, USA, Australia, etc. for most expats. It is also a fact that living in rural areas of any of these countries in Southeast Asia is cheaper than living in the larger cities there. So finding the absolute lowest cost of living would be more influenced by your ability to thrive in rural areas. Locals in rural areas just don't have the higher paying jobs that push prices up in the larger cities. So rural means cheaper in Southeast Asia and all over the world. Conversely, if you prefer to live in rural areas, you generally won't find as many people that speak your language, English or whatever. So you'll need to work harder to integrate into a rural area. You'll have to pick up the language or hope the internet data is strong enough to use Google Translate as you walk about. If you aren't sure whether you'll be able to learn the local language, then you might consider settling in the Philippines or Malaysia. Those two countries teach English in school. Without the language barrier, you can achieve the lowest cost of living more quickly in rural areas of the Philippines and Malaysia. Why? Because you'll be able to have more nuanced conversation with people when you're trying to find out where to get things and negotiate prices once you find them. In the cities of Vietnam and Cambodia, there's almost always someone near you that speaks some English. But when you go into the rural areas, that's not always true. You'll have a harder time achieving the lowest cost of living. That's why the Philippines or Malaysia might be better for some people. But that never stops me from pulling out Google Translate in rural areas of Vietnam and Cambodia. So that doesn't really stop me. All four of these countries are so cheap, the cost of living should not decide which of the four you decide to establish as your base in Southeast Asia. So if the cost of living will not determine for most people, what should they be considering? Each person looking to retire internationally is going to be weighing various factors differently than others, such as healthcare, crime rates, infrastructure, language, barriers, local food choices, visa considerations, internet, strength, walkability, expat populations, beauty and availability of nature, cost of round-trip tickets to their home country, foreigner acceptance, and many other factors. But one factor that we all have that is hard to articulate and measure is how you feel while you're living in that country. If you love life again when you are living there, that's a good sign. Even if all the other factors are rated highly for you somewhere, you might pick another place that doesn't rate as high on paper if you love life again when you are living there. I remember how I felt the first few times I walked down a white sand beach in Thailand. The turquoise blue water, the palm trees, the thatched roof huts selling $2 rice curries and 50-cent beers. Everything was so cheap and easy. I just loved every moment while I was living there. It was so cheap and easy in Thailand 20 years ago, I actually calculated how long I could last if I emailed my boss and quit that day. I wasn't worried about burning cash at every turn. The thatched roof huts selling $2 curries and 50-cent beers were family owned. If they had made $50 that day, they were ahead of the game. Things were just different in Hawaii, Florida, or California. It was beautiful, no doubt, but not so carefree. You had to keep your money on your mind and your mind on your money. The restaurants there needed to charge $15 for meals, $5 for beers, because they have to spend thousands of dollars every month in rent, employee taxes, zoning codes, fire safety, income tax, walk-in refrigerators, stainless steel food preparation counters, sidewalks, parking, etc. Not only was the food 3 times as much, but so would my rent, my car, my health insurance, you name it. The thought of easy retirement never occurred to me in a realistic way when I visited Florida, Hawaii, or California. I never thought once to email my boss and quit my job. Everyone around me was so stressed. They were all doing their best to play the game, only the rock stars and the multimillionaires were relaxing. That wasn't me. I really never melted into a beach towel under a palm tree in the USA like I do in Southeast Asia. But things have changed for me since I fell in love with Thailand. Don't get me wrong, Thailand is still an amazing place to start your self-discovery. But as time passes, you may find you prefer places like the Philippines or Vietnam, Malaysia, or Cambodia. That is where I get the feeling to say, screw it, I'm staying. But the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia are just so different from each other. Let me see if I can explain how they feel different from each other. In the end, I will ask you which one feels like home to you based upon my descriptions. Okay, don't listen now. It's time to feel as I describe these. Okay, the Philippines. The Philippines is for nature lovers. There are about 7,000 islands in the Philippines, and many islands have a volcano in the middle with a waterfall or two. Most people in the Philippines are less than 20 minutes away from water they can swim in or fish, both oceans and rivers. The most pristine white sand beaches with turquoise blue waters are visited less frequently and are more of a celebration. Those pristine beaches you see on Instagram are more often on smaller islands, 1 or 2 ferry rides from where most people live. There are a few exceptions, such as Boracay or Panglao, so they end up being packed with tourists. With remote pristine beaches and waterfalls being infrequent celebrations for most areas of the Philippines, most cities revolve around local markets and mall life. People love to go people watching in the mall, shopping in local traditional markets, and walking in the city and waterfront parks. The Philippines is not a place for international foodies. They have their local food favorites, but very few people go to the Philippines specifically for food experiences. Plus, there's not a large selection of vegetarian or vegan restaurants in most mid-sized or small cities in the Philippines. Okay, Cambodia. Cambodia is an undeveloped blast from the past that has maintained a historic elegance. The national psyche is still recovering from the reign of the Khmer Rouge, which killed all the educated or successful people. The pace of life here is as easy as it gets. The pace seemed as slow as Myanmar or Laos. It is wide open like Laos, but drier and not as green. Landmines that filled the countryside for decades have kept natural tourism in check. 𝐶𝐸m Reap was built and maintained to support the tourism passing through Angkor Wat. If you've only been to 𝐶𝐸m Reap, you don't really know what Cambodia feels like. Kampot in Cambodia is a great place if you like to smoke weed, drink $1 beers on the riverside houseboats, and eat excellent $5 food prepared by Europeans that have moved there. There's also cheap food, $1 meals available in locally owned restaurants. Kayak lovers will love Kampot. Kep is a short bus ride from Kampot for a day at the beach. Battambang is a quaint colonial-era town, even slower paced than Kampot. Cambodia, it's the path less taken. Okay, Vietnam. Vietnam is a place for ancient culture and traditions. There's a deep respect for family and elders. The Vietnamese are proud people that will serve you respectfully, but do not pander for tourist dollars. If you give respect, it will be returned in abundance. Over the centuries, they have sent the Chinese, the French, and the Americans packing. They know and respect their traditions. They have watched one government after another come and go, and have even survived civil wars for centuries. Their culture survives even when their government does not. When you're in Vietnam, you're a guest, interested in their culture. You're not the centerpiece. It's a lovely place to be because you are seeing authentic traditions through their eyes. The Vietnamese are interested in sharing their culture. They know its value and have little interest or desire to become homogenized in global ideals. They embrace the future on their own terms. If you enjoy learning about other cultures rather than expecting your host to adapt to your culture, you'll love Vietnam. If you come to teach Vietnam your better way, you'll feel out of place. But if you come as a cultural student, you'll feel at home here. The food in Vietnam is as good as anywhere in the world. Again, come as a student and you'll learn this. If you're a vegetarian or vegan, there will be restaurants in almost every town to feed you. Just find a Buddhist temple and then look for the words chai, C-H-A-Y, in the restaurant's name. Go on inside and eat with confidence. Okay, Malaysia. Malaysia is a place for foodies. Because of centuries of British and Dutch colonial rule during the spice trade, food would always be its calling card. That has remained true. Malaysia remains an integration of Malay, Chinese, and Indian cultures, and that makes it a special place. Thankfully, Islamophobia has kept some of the blatant globalization found in Thailand at bay over the last few decades. During that time, there's been an integration of the existing 3 populations in Malaysia that will maintain a greater influence on Malaysia's character going forward. That fear may have kept other Westerners from competing with me for Cheng Hoi's attention. The next generation of integrated Malaysians know who they are. They are better prepared to embrace the world without losing their soul. They are casting off their grandparents' fear of the other. Most people in the West now have at least one Muslim friend they love, unless they live in flyover country. So the world is ready to embrace this country that has much to teach about life. Malaysia is one of the highest capita incomes in Southeast Asia, other than Singapore and Brunei. But a glut of high-end luxury high-rise condos has kept rents low in the 3 hotspots for expats: Penang, Kuala Lumpur, and Malacca. But don't forget to visit the northern part of Borneo while you're in Malaysia. Make sure you also see the Perhentian Islands, Cameron Highlands, and Langkawi. The healthcare, the organization, and the general overall cleanliness and lack of chaos in Malaysia may cause you to forget you're in Southeast Asia. Okay, conclusion. I promised to ask you a question at the end. Which one feels more like home? You can visit them all, but which one feels like home? Okay, thanks for listening to my video. Please comment, like, subscribe, or share if you enjoyed the value I provided here. Click the more information link in the notes below this video if you'd like to get a free copy of my ebook, How I Fired My Boss and Traveled the World for 13 Years. Thanks for listening. This is Dan of Vagabond Buddha.